name's Jack Brown. I'm the board chair of Rivanna Conservation Society. And we're in the middle of a week of events that Rivanna Conservation is sponsoring called the Rivanna Makeover, and we're trying to do various things that focus attention and action on the 6-mile stretch of the reservoir that starts at the South Fork Dam, goes right past here, and up just beyond Rays Ford Road. And we've gotten a fair amount of public interest in this, and that's very, very gratifying. Tonight, specifically, we're hoping to have a kind of informational conversation about the upcoming plans to dredge the reservoir. This conversation, I'm hoping to have it be very forward-looking. The community has had a chance to talk a lot in the past about different water supply options, and we have come together around a plan. So my point of view is it's marvelous. We have a plan, and now let's look ahead from where we are now and understand, in particular, the dredging part of what's coming along. So let me first say some thank yous. First to our hosts, John and Rebecca Haydock, who have made this lovely spot available to us. Can't beat meeting on the reservoir.
Agree.
It really is, and a lovely evening for it. Thanks to all of you who have come out, especially thanks to Tom. Anybody who opens the newspaper around here in the last few years realizes that Tom Frederick is one of the more overworked men in town, and that RWSA has been doing an awful lot across its brief in water and sewerage and all over the region. So we appreciate you taking the time tonight, Tom.
Sure.
So the format I'd like to follow, I have some questions, most of which were submitted to me in advance, and I intend to ask Tom just to go address these questions, and we'll go through them pretty quickly, I suspect. And then my hope is that that will leave at least half an hour for questions and answers, questions from the floor. So that's our overall approach here. I suppose if I ask a question and Tom has an answer and there's some burning thought you have to leap in with, then sure, we're small enough and low-key enough, we can manage that. But in general, let's save the audience Q&A for the last half hour or so. And if that all works for everybody, I guess the last thought is when we get to audience Q&A, it'd be very helpful if you would tell us who you are and speak loudly, since we want to make sure we capture your voice. So with all of that as preamble, I will start with just a pretty basic question. Can you tell us, Tom, at this stage what the status is in awarding a contract for dredging and when you would envision work actually beginning on the water?
Sure. Thank you very much for inviting me here. I'm grateful for the opportunity and the scenery, and add my thanks to the host for this meeting. I'm going to start. I'll probably give you a little background on this if it's okay, and I may touch on some of your other questions, and if I do, maybe we can work through it. But in January of this year, 3 bodies, the City of Charlottesville, the Albemarle County Service Authority, which provides retail water and sewer service to the county, and the Rivanna Water and Sewer Authority, signed an agreement. Most people read in the newspaper that agreement was about how much the city and county were going to pay for the Ragged Mountain Dam. But there's a section of that contract I'll start with, and it says that Rivanna will do some dredging of the South Fork Rivanna Reservoir, limited to a total project budget of $3.5 million. And the city and county will equally share that cost. We are a wholesaler. Most of you may already know that. We're a wholesaler. We sell to the city and county. So everything we spend, our revenue sources have to come from those 2 agencies, because we're not allowed to retail sell anything except, there's one exception on wastewater. We deal directly with septic tank haulers, but that doesn't affect water. So we have to go to the city and the county, and they agreed to split the cost 50-50. They did set an upper limit of $3.5 million, which I think is important. We are engaged in a process called, we call it PPEA. It stands for Public-Private Partnership, Education and Infrastructure. It's a state law that provides a new way of procurement. Instead of we go out and we design exactly what we want done and put it on drawings and the contractor bids it. And in that situation, the contractors are all bidding exactly the same thing. So whoever has the lowest price wins. That's the traditional bidding approach. This allows for some more innovation and some more conversation. Where in the first phase, we have received what we call concept-based proposals, which is just what it would indicate. The contractor is not bound to any details at this point. He just presents in general his idea for what work he would perform, what he thinks it might cost, and who might he utilize as partners in that effort. We were really hoping to get multiple proposals. That would be the best case scenario, because then we have a lot of menu of different ideas on how to perform the work that we could choose from. Unfortunately, when we receive the proposals, the first step you have to go through is a legal review to determine that everybody who submitted a proposal submitted all of the categories of information. This is not evaluating at this point, but that they submitted all the basic requirements of the request for proposals that we sent out. We received 3 proposals. I frankly was a little disappointed. I was hoping to see more. And then what was also very disappointing is 2 of the 3 who submitted did not meet all the requirements. So what that's done is it means we've got 1 proposal to evaluate, and it's by a company called Orion Marine Group. They're headquartered in Tampa, Florida. From the information, they are quite experienced at dredging, mostly marine, as their name would indicate, but some reservoir dredging also. They've indicated that they would estimate dredging about 300,000 cubic yards in the upper portions of the reservoir in and around near the Rays Ford Bridge. All the numbers I'm giving you are not exact at this point. They're still subject to negotiation. They also said they thought the price would be about $3.5 million. We're limited to a total budget of $3.5 million, including the expenses that we hire an engineer to oversee, make sure that the contractor does the work right before they're paid. We have some legal expenses. So they'll probably, unless the city and the county raise that target, we'll probably have to negotiate a little bit smaller scope of work. I'll just say that up front, since we are capped based on our current agreement at that amount. Most of what would be dredged is probably going to be sand based on data that's been collected so far. Sand is more marketable, although silts and clays are also marketable, but for different purposes. Usually silts and clays can make good constructive wetlands, for example. Sand is used for a whole lot of things, including structural fill in construction. And sand is certainly in need in this area, because unless you're walking along the riverbanks, and you guys do some of that kind of stuff, but unless you're walking along the riverbanks, it's kind of hard to find a lot of sand in this part of the Piedmont. Orion indicated that they had a subcontractor named Waterway who they do bathymetric surveys, which helps determine what they've done. Waterway also is experienced in obtaining Corps and state permits and county erosion and sediment control permits that they've identified would be required. They identified Panorama Pay Dirt as a partner. You may have seen in the newspaper that Panorama was quick to say, we don't have a contract with Orion yet, hold your horses. So I'll just leave it at that, because it's not my place to get between those 2 parties. They will need to negotiate their own terms. Orion's proposal also said they would like the boat launch to be the UVA rowing team's site. I do not know if a contract has been worked up there yet or not.
There's been no discussion.
Okay.
Virginia Rowing Association, which owns the property.
We had a public meeting last month. Tom was there. Would love to have seen some more of you there as well. Maybe we'll see you next time. The purpose of the meeting was simply to receive feedback, and Tom made some comments. He may be willing to share some of those, or may have already shared some of those with you. The meeting was not well attended. I've been to public meetings where over 100 citizens, even up to 200 citizens have shown up. I think there were probably about 5, 6 citizens plus media and staff at this particular meeting. So compared to some of the public meetings that I've held before on other topics, this wasn't very well attended. May be helpful for you to know that. The next step, we have a panel of individuals, including Gary O'Connell from the ACSA, Lauren Hildebrand from the City of Charlottesville, Mark Graham from Albemarle County, Jennifer Whitaker, who is Ravenna's chief engineer, and myself. The 5 of us will sit down and we will go over Orion's proposal in greater length and rank that proposal and make a determination what to recommend to our board of directors in terms of how we go forward. Do we go straight to a contract phase and negotiate a contract, by which time then Orion has to have all their subcontracts in hand? Do we go to a detailed phase proposal? Normally, if you had multiple good proposals, you'd go to a detailed phase so you can sort out in a little more detail what different parties offer. Since we only have one here, it may be more attractive to skip that step and go straight to contract negotiations. But that's a decision that has yet to be made. We could say Orion's proposal is really not good enough. We don't want to enter into a contract with them, at which point we either start over or decide not to build a project. I don't think at this point in time, unless the contract that I just told you up front, the January contract has changed, it does direct Ravenna to do a project up to $3.5 million. So unless we're directed differently, our aim is going to be to do everything we can to get that project done. The Orion proposal indicated that from the time they get a contract to get all the permits in hand, it could take 9 to 12 months. So you might not expect to actually see dredging go on for maybe another year. We do have a target to try to bring a recommendation to our board of directors in November, which then we'll get an answer what to proceed to do as far as the next step. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, but hopefully answered where we are in the contract phase.
Sure, that's helpful. As you see, I've got 15 questions, so I'm just going to start wading through them. And
so I got to get shorter with my answers.
No, you're perfect. So from what you know of the technology that Orion is suggesting it would use, if I am living on the reservoir, what am I going to see and hear? What's literally going to happen? What will I notice?
Our request for proposals requires processes that are quiet. So they're going to need to be putting mufflers on for the noise. So you should not detect much noise. HDR has told us that a well-run dredge operation should not create any more noise than a hum, maybe at my pitch of talking right now. You shouldn't hear anything louder than that if we do it right. Our job then will be to make sure Orion adheres to the RFP requirement.
Right. And
Comparable to the bridge traffic we're hearing right now or less?
That's a fair statement, yes.
okay.
Now, it might be a steady hum as opposed to, traffic goes kind of up and down and stuff. It may be more of a steady hum. But yes, that's about right.
Can you tell us briefly, it was 3 boards that allotted money and instructed RWSA to dredge. Your bosses, in essence.
Yes.
What did they think the purpose was? Why do it?
That's a tough question to answer, honestly, because I suspect different public officials may have different reasons. There was a discussion in this community about dredging because it's a good water supply alternative. There was a task force that met. Tom was on that task force that suggested that, if we're going to build a dam for now, for our 50-year plan, maybe what we need to be doing is protecting areas that might become wetlands and become protected areas of the reservoir for future water supply. I've heard some folks say that, well, we need a better place for the UVA women's team to row, that we have recreational opportunities, and I've heard other things mentioned as reasons for dredging.
Okay. So you're among the more knowledgeable folks in this spot right now about the reservoir and the land that abuts it. Do you, simply based on that knowledge, do you have any thoughts about other access points for the dredging work, staging points, besides the UVA boathouse, properly known as the Virginia Rowing Association boathouse? Are there other spots that could be appropriate for staging this work?
Unless a dredger could work with a private landowner to develop a staging site, there are limited locations for staging. One place that our consultant looked was right down here off the Woodlands Bridge, where there's a small boat launch. It was determined that while it's small, it might be possible to launch a dredge in that area, but the problem is to get under that bridge, can't do it. So that one sort of got ruled out basically because of the bridge. You have to actually would bring a crane on the bridge to pick the dredge up and load it to the other side of the bridge. And that's, I can see why any dredging contractor would love the UVA site.
Okay. So current plans call, I mean, if you go look and see what's available to describe this project, it looks roughly like a plan to dredge roughly 1.5 miles of the upper segment of the reservoir. In other words, there's 3 identified segments. Each is roughly a 1/2 mile long. It all is happening in the upper area just below Raisford Road. Understanding that you have a limited budget, but asking you, Tom Frederick, as the man responsible for water supply in the area, would you like to see a next stage of dredging beyond that relatively focused and limited area, or not?
I think that's a decision the community at large has to make.
Okay. Next question. You alluded in your remarks to the fact that there's various kinds of market value to the various kinds of recoverable material, be it clays, sand. Does RWSA wish to ascertain the market value of those spoils, or is that simply a matter for the contractor?
That is a matter for the contractor.
Why wouldn't RWSA want to know the market value of what's coming out of its property?
If you're asking, do we know what the price is?
Okay.
We can ask, if a contractor obtains a price and he's willing to share that with us, certainly we'd like to know. We're not experts in the sand and gravel business. And that, if I use the term, if we're talking about marketing sand, we're water and sewer purveyors. We're not sand and gravel contractors, and those are the people who know best how to market sand and gravel. So based on that, our determination was let the dredger, they can either do it themselves or they can work with a sand and gravel contractor.
Right. I guess the question wasn't, I wasn't asking would RWSA want to be selling sand. I asked would RWSA want to know the value of the sand that it currently owns.
Sure, we'd like to know.
Okay. And could one structure a contract for dredging that would in fact be predicated on RWSA having some kind of cost recovery based on the value of the sand?
What's interesting here, we sent an RFP out that I said was wide open and allowed, we set the basic parameters, but we gave the contractors a lot of latitude to say how they would do it. Orion did say that Panorama Pay Dirt was who they proposed to use. Then they also told us in their proposal that Panorama Pay Dirt does not want the soil to leave their site once it's deposited on their site. So that means our potential contractor is not proposing to market the material. I will tell you this, our RFP allowed, and in words that we could describe, tried to incentivize contractors to look at marketing opportunities. We wanted to maximize that potential. This contractor chose not to do that. So if we enter in a contract with Orion and we respect the conceptual proposal they gave us, we would not require that information because they're not proposing to market it.
And just to close the point out, and therefore in the end, after spending $3 million, we wouldn't know the value of what we pulled out of the water.
we would know the value, I think, of the reservoir af- in terms of its ability to store water, which is what would be more important to us, and the other objectives. And some of those objectives are qualitative in nature. We would understand that. We might not understand what the value on a market of selling the sand that's removed from the reservoir.
Okay. So can we turn now, and I'm sensitive that you all probably have questions as well, so I'm not going to go over my time, but I'd love to turn now to the place of this reservoir now in RVOSA's planning. So in the water supply plan, which the community has signed off on and dirt is moving, we have an altered configuration for water supply. And without maps and pointers, I suspect we don't really want to get involved in a full discussion of where water is going to be and how it's going to flow and that kind of thing. But the question is this: can you characterize for us what the place of South Fork Reservoir is in the new water supply plan? In other words, is South Fork vital for X, for Y, for Z? Is South Fork less important than it once was? Can you just give us a kind of status report there about the place of this reservoir now in the new plan?
I would suggest that the South Fork Reservoir is still the vital, and the most important component of our water supply process. This reservoir is fed by 269 square miles of watershed area going all the way to the Shenandoah Forest. It is much larger in terms of watershed area than any of our other reservoirs. It is the largest source, something on the order of 95 to 97% of the water that the urban area drinks comes from this reservoir, and it would continue to do so under the new plan. One day a pipeline will be built to Ragged Mountain if the plan is further implemented, but the source of the water will still be here. So I think it is of vital importance to the community.
Great. And given that, we have this upstream dredging project, but can you tell us anything about what kind of maintenance work might be required at the other end, down at the dam? Since the dam is what makes the reservoir, can we simply ignore that dam and count on it being there forever and ever, or are there things that will have to happen at that end of the reservoir in maintenance in the long haul?
Any dam requires maintenance. They're getting better and better at designing them, so they require less and less maintenance. But monitoring of all dams is required, and we monitor all dams through our chief engineer. The dam that's here is regulated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, because it is a hydroelectric dam. They have strenuous requirements on inspection, maintenance, emergency response planning. We just did a few months ago an emergency response drill at the Charlottesville-Albemarle UVA EOC, which stands for Emergency Operations Center, where you get departments from all over those three organizations, plus a lot of other agencies like ours in the community, and you do a drill. You actually simulate a disaster and how you're going to respond to it in order to learn how to deal with an emergency response. And we just a few months ago did that for this dam at South Fork. All dams require maintenance. The Ragged Mountain Dam will require maintenance, though probably not as much in the early stages because it'll be a brand new dam.
Specifically, one question related to maintenance of this dam. Is there a concern that at some point we'll have to remove silt deposits near the dam, either because of its structural integrity or because of access to the intake for water supply? Or is that not a pressing issue?
From a standpoint of the intake, it's not a pressing issue. If we did nothing for several decades, it could be in the long run an issue.
Right. Okay. Rivanna Conservation is interested in removing obstacles to the natural passage of fish up and down the Rivanna. We are especially interested in that if recent efforts succeed in restoring historic runs of shad and other fish to the James. So have you any sense of whether RWSA would be willing to commit resources or cooperate with agencies and nonprofits to create fish passage structures around the Rivanna Dam, the South Fork Dam?
I can tell you that there is no budget in the RWSA Capital Improvement Program right now to do something like that. That's something, if you as an organization are interested in, that you could initiate some conversation on if you wanted to. And like everything goes through a CIP, priorities are set. It's always true, and that's why your involvement in things that you want to see done in the community is important, is it's always true that there are more ideas than there is money. And so that means something always has to be cut.
I only have 3 more questions.
Okay.
So today you and I can't swim in the South Fork Reservoir because it's a public water supply. But cattle swim in the South Fork Reservoir most every day of the week. Do you want to change that fact?
Yes.
Okay, so good.
Yes.
Let's stay the other way.
The dredging company is going to need access to dredge this body of water. A road and staging area, we've had some conversation in the last half hour about this. Currently, public access to this reservoir is very limited and hasn't essentially changed since it was built. And that lack of access makes it very hard for those who fish from boats or from the shore, makes it hard for kayakers and canoeists to get to the water. Frankly, makes it hard to have a public constituency that cares about this body of water. So clearly the immediate access needed for dredging could, if public authorities chose to, result in a better long-term permanent public access. Does RWSA wish to see that?
We would be happy to support the other agencies that we work with to get a better boat launch on the reservoir. You know, key question is who provides the funding for it and who is the chief agency to get it done. I know when I came here in, I can't believe it's been 8 years, but it's been over 8 years now, that the county actually had a design for a new boat launch near the South Fork Water Treatment Plant. And then for some reason it got cut and it didn't get built. So one thing that you guys could encourage, if you're interested in that, is encourage Albemarle County to put that back on the table and talk about it.
In the same location.
Well, they've already got a plan, so it would make sense to talk about it in the same location.
It's a very bad man.
I don't know of any environmental or technical reason why that site is not sufficient. I think it was probably a budget issue.
Right. Public funds, assuming Orion goes ahead, public funds are about to be spent to provide temporary access to the river. So the issue I was trying to explore was, we all know that public funds will be spent to provide temporary access. What was your perspective on spending public funds to provide more permanent access?
I mean, I think it's definitely a question this community can engage in. I'm not trying to dodge the question so much as to say I'm the instrument that implements what the community decides they want. I'm not the advocate. I'm the guy who gets the things done.
Okay.
So if you're the advocate and you want it, you go advocate for it. That's the message.
Gotcha. Last question, and it's not about dredging. And I please do encourage you all to have your own questions here. I don't pretend to have covered all the major issues by any means. But turning away from dredging, let's assume for the moment that the new bypass, the western bypass for Route 29 goes ahead. That will be a large-scale construction project that will require a new bridge to cross the Rivanna just below the South Fork Dam. And the right-of-way of that new bypass will run within 1,000 feet of the reservoir for over a mile. In some areas, the new road would come within 500 feet of the reservoir. Rainwater runoff from that construction project will want to get into the reservoir, which already has a siltation problem. Can you tell us how RWSA might foresee monitoring that project and acting to ensure that it doesn't threaten the water supply?
The VDOT recently, because Federal Highway said you have to go through another EA process, I'm sure you guys already know that. They went through an EA process, which is environmental assessment. Sorry, I'll try to pronounce the acronyms in case some of you don't know what they are. And included a public comment period. Our organization submitted public comments. We stated to them, if the project does proceed, that we would expect and enforce the enhanced erosion and sediment control measures all the way along the area that's in the water supply that VDOT committed to in the first round when this project came up some 10 years or so ago. Our organization is not taking a position on the bypass. I don't mind admitting to you, I have some board members who oppose it and I have some board members who favor it. It's not our job to decide whether it gets built or not, obviously, but we will take measures to enforce enhanced erosion sediment control if the project proceeds. And that may include taking measures on our own, such as measuring if any sediment comes into the reservoir. We haven't come up with a detailed plan yet. I don't want to invest resources in a detailed plan if the project's not going to be built. But if we see, yes, the project's definitely going to happen, then yes, we will put together a plan to protect the reservoir.
Great. So, thank you, Tom. I appreciate your answers. And so now we're taking questions from the floor. So it'd be a great help if you just raise your hand. I'll call on you. And if you'd identify yourself by name, please.